Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first career chat and shoot during lunchtime. I thought I'd take a few minutes out of the day. Maybe some of you are eating lunch, and to answer any career questions, if you'd like to jump in on the comments, and I can help to do that. While we are waiting for that to happen, I do want to talk about a specific topic. And remember, feel free to jump in at any time and ask your any type of career question. But while we wait for any questions to come in, I want to go ahead and talk about a topic on management theory. So part of my doctoral studies, I've taken a lot of different coursework on leadership, management, etc. And I concluded my coursework last week. I'm very excited about that. It took about 1.5 years. I'm about to start my dissertation process. And the conclusion of the coursework focused on a management theory class. And if you're not familiar with theory or theories in general when it comes to business, for example, there's leadership theories, there's management theories. These things have been cobbled together over time, in some cases centuries, based upon observing practices in organizations and creating theories around ways to improve things. And over time, this has developed into different eras. And that's a specific case for management theory. On the leadership theory side, there's like over 200 scholarly definitions of leadership. You've got like transformational leadership, transactional leadership. You also have things like leader membership exchange. There's tons of different leadership theories as well. But while waiting for any questions to come in, I thought I'd share a little bit of education on management theories, and I'm going to do that today by walking you through a presentation that I recently gave as part of my concluding my coursework for my doctorate. I'm just viewing, see if we have any comments. I think we have a comment from Erickson. If you have a question, Erickson, feel free to ask, but I'm going to go ahead and continue to walk through this management theory presentation. So the context of this presentation was to take what was learned from the coursework and to apply it in a business setting. And in this setting, it's for a board of directors around the Q1 discussion. One thing that I found very practical with academics and going back to school while working full time, when I went back for my MBA and also now with my doctorate in business administration, it's the ability to immediately apply these things in the work that we're doing. And that's been of great benefit. So I'm hoping some of the things that I'm going to share with you in this conversation, you could potentially apply it to what you're doing in your work right now, or maybe at a minimum, at least helps to bring some clarity or validation around some of the things that you've been doing in your job or you've been seeing happening around your job and just kind of couldn't put a label on it. So with that, let's go ahead. So the context here is this company, this is a board of directors meeting, and there are some significant challenges in place that this company is facing. A decrease in revenue growth, looking at quarter over quarter, a decrease in profit. Customer demand is down, as well as customers willing to recommend this business to other leads and prospects is significantly down. Resource utilization is up, and then unfortunately, the company's utilizing more resources and getting less return on it. And we see employee satisfaction and attrition. Satisfaction is going down significantly, and attrition is also increasing, meaning people aren't happy in their jobs, and also people are leaving. And this is further contextualized with the generational shift. So Generation Z is coming on board, and perhaps their expectations of what they want to be as leaders is different than what's expected as part of the business. So just to give you just to take a step back and give you some context, the reason this last piece is in here is usually when you do some type of doctoral coursework, you also focus your research topic, what you intend to do your dissertation on, as part of the coursework. So it gets contextualized in the coursework. So my doctoral research is focusing on Generation Z's leadership expectations of itself. So that's why you might see this represented in the presentation. So what are maybe some generalized solutions or approaches that we can take to resolve some of these business challenges? One is the application of different management era theories, and ultimately adopting the standardized approach with a select group of theories that I'll walk you through to improve those top and bottom line numbers, as well as operations and customer and employee satisfaction. So in this example, we've seen a significant decrease in customer satisfaction, attrition, as well as employee satisfaction and attrition. And then based upon those problems, that last problem that I articulated, it's how do we prepare and reconcile some of the expectations of aspiring Generation Z corporate leaders. So some of the ways that we can approach and use management theory to resolve some of the challenges that I've demonstrated at the beginning of this conversation is to focus on relevant early management theories. And this is kind of, this could be significantly a long period of time, hundreds, if not 1,000 or more years, within the starting like up, going all the way up to maybe like the early 1800s. And you can see points of view on management from people like Confucius, as well as philosophers like Aristotle. Reading some of their works, you may see some of the things applied to management, like participation, meaning participation of workers in like the vision and the strategy and creating ownership. You may see this in some of the early conversations represented by Aristotle. And these things over time get developed and more synthesized and turned into theory and into application. So a little bit later on in that early management era, what really started to happen in Northern Europe was this understanding and ability to start to create small information networks and to create knowledge sharing. And what that ultimately resulted in was that region's ability to lower the costs of shipping and to grow. And around at the same time, in France became a commerce and technical innovation hub within Europe because of its focus on educating workers on technical competencies. And this enabled France at that time to establish a foothold in the region from a commerce perspective. You have scholars such as Adam Smith, who is one of the key scholars during this time period, focusing on things like profitability. So if there's a sense of like, if we're too profitable, perhaps that means there isn't enough competition in the space and we're getting a little bit complacent and we're not investing in research and development and possibly our own team members. And also during this era, towards the end of it, the concept of opportunity cost came up. And an example here is what's the opportunity cost of not investing in employee skills? It could be diminishment of growth over time. And another key point, and which there are many in each of the eras, is that this establishment of the importance of a skilled and well-paid workforce, which would provide long-term and broad benefits to an organization. So if we look at these 5 different areas on the left that we derive from early management theories, how can we apply them to the situation that I discussed at the beginning of this video? So work to increase knowledge sharing between small teams and also with tools as part of standard operating procedures. We should be investing in the technical education for technical and non-technical workers. We should invest in other functional and soft skills for employees, and then fund programs using our profit to show the company's commitment to workers and to long-term growth. So remember, at the beginning of this video, I talked about some of the main problems were employee satisfaction as well as attrition. And these different management theories, or these pieces of management theories from this era, we can use to apply to make some improvements in those metrics. Then we move on to the scientific management era, and a lot of the work that was done during this time in like the 19th century, done by Taylor as well as Emerson, others, is focused on what some coined the efficiency craze. So this ability to measure the subject matter expertise of different types of functions and roles, and to make sure to target the right KPIs in order to drive efficiency within each of those expertise and to improve profitability. A lot of the work that was done during this era and compiling these theories around this era was around profitability and less around growth. But a lot of the things that you might see in your job today, like things like time studies and studies around capacity and resource planning, really came from, or at least really started from, this era of management theory, understanding the importance of metrics and subject matter expertise. And also one thing to note, just to jump back to early era management theory, is during that time, one of the major transformations was going from this kind of landowner-based mentality to corporate-based mentality, entities as corporations, and how that really started to shift the perspective on expectations around workers and on profitability and business, and the desire to actually come up with theoretical approaches to make businesses work together. But on the management theory side, it's about those measurable processes specific to subject matter expertise and within specific industries. The way that the KPIs were set was to look at the strongest performing employees and to create that baseline, and then to reward when that baseline would be exceeded, that expectation was exceeded. But at the same time, and you might feel this in your job today, when there's too much commitment on the scientific management side, workers, we can start to feel like we're being treated like machines, and it becomes very mechanical. And a lot of the social pieces get thrown out the window. And there's actually a response to that. I'll talk about that in a moment. And another aspect of this is not only the standardization of measurement, as well as process and implementation, it's also the standardization of tools to impact profitability. So what are some of the things that we can do by using scientific management era theories to solve some of the problems that we're having across customer and employee attrition and satisfaction, as well as revenue and profitability issues? Well, we can identify underperforming industry practices and cross-reference those with what we're doing in our firm in order to prioritize things and processes that we might need to fix within our own organization. Then from there, define sets of metrics for those processes based upon subject matter expertise. So maybe you're a data scientist and you have certain KPIs that are relevant for that subject matter expertise. Maybe you're a brand specialist and there's certain KPIs that are relevant for that subject matter expertise, how to optimize towards those KPIs. And then something that we saw in the early management theory era, this carries over: pay workers better, who are performing better than the average, pay them well, and also find opportunities. We want to not just make about this work mechanical. We need to create opportunities, social opportunities, because ultimately at the end of the day, we're people, we're not machines, and we have certain requirements when we show up to the job. And that brings us to social management theory and application. And this is kind of like a counterpoint to the scientific approach where things started to become very mechanical, and then transitioning more towards the human condition. And this is when scholars and practitioners started to think about how a company is really organized by human activity with social processes. So it's not just these scientific levers and process that you pull on, and that it should be considered more holistically the process of an organization. It should be both technical and social at the same time. And then there's a sense of like a social psychology. And that's because everything that's done within an organization that touches upon a person is as a human involved in it, and therefore should consider social aspects. And really the oil that makes the human condition and social aspects function are relationships. And those relationships, they're very hard to quantify and and to define, but we need to be aware that they exist. And a lot of that was represented in the social management era thinking. And then one way to fuel those relationships is to increase trust and also transparency. So looking at these different human condition factors, these social factors, how can we apply them and stack them on top of the factors that we looked at from the other eras in order to improve those top and bottom line numbers and those customer and employee numbers? Well, the first thing is we need to be mindful to prioritize human connections between workers. That's kind of like the glue, the interaction, the unseen parts of the process. We need to give opportunities to workers to participate in vision and strategy creation, to give ownership. I talked about Aristotle and this sense of participation. This is really a social aspect as well. So we can create ownership when we allow our team members to participate in the visioning and the strategy, so that everyone feels like there's ownership in it. And then when it comes to the implementation, you're going to be more motivated to do it because that ownership exists. And create opportunities if things are becoming more mechanical to help people move to more judgment-based type roles, where it really requires the human mind and that multidimensionalism to make decisions and to factor in the social components that a scientific approach could not. Then we need to create environments where people can interact and be social, and also to establish trust and transparency. And this is a challenge in work from home environments, right? We primarily talk through these video interfaces. We have less of these in-person meeting points. So there's a little bit of an exchange for the work from home, but people are coming up with inventive ways to create these social environments in work from home and virtual situations. And then finally, like, be as transparent as possible with team members. Sometimes maybe there's certain laws that are in place that only allow a certain degree of transparency, or there's a corporate policy that allows a certain degree of transparency. Those things need to be evaluated, perhaps in order to fuel more of the social aspects within the business. We could look at revising certain corporate policies in order to do a better job of encouraging those social interactions. And then finally, the fourth era that I'm going to conclude on here is the modern management era. And that's, you hear a lot of quotes from Drucker and managing by objectives. It's really the sense that as managers, we perform a service for our employees. We are in service of our employees, and our employees are the ones that really own the business because they're out there selling it every day. Whether you're in sales, or you're in marketing, or you're in customer service, or you're in procurement, you're in logistics, all of those social interactions, that's a connection of the company to all different people internally and externally. And then one thing that was important when I reviewed modern management era theories is this sense of, as leaders, we need to be very aware of our cognitive and other types of biases, because that forms a lens, and that lens narrows and continues to narrow through a series of process in our mind and decision making, ultimately leading to a strategic decision. And that strategic decision, if it gets too narrowed, can really create a bias and perhaps not the best strategic decision. And that could really shape an organization, a team, a company, a go-to-market strategy moving forward. And then finally, in modern management era theories, this concept of we could have success, but there's a consequence for that success. How are we taking corporate responsibility for some of the consequences of that success? So is there an environmental impact? Are there groups that are negatively impacted? Those things need to be addressed as part of success, not just as failure. So how can we apply some of these things to fix the problems that I was talking about at the beginning of this presentation? Train managers in servant leadership. In modern management, there's this concept of managers being serving the employees and empowering employees to make decisions on the ground to help facilitate those social interactions. And as leaders, if we're making decisions, we need to go through some type of bias busting training so that we're very conscious of the lens that we put on decisions. And then we could offer accountability training, offer rewards based on certain types of metrics to help to foster the corporate responsibility pieces. So at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about different management theories and then putting a lens of Generation Z on top of it. So my prelim research in Generation Z, and as I mentioned, I'm currently in the process of starting my dissertation in understanding what Generation Z expects from itself as leaders. There are many things to consider thus far in the preliminary research. There's Generation Z leaders may determine success for themselves, not generally as what a business might determine success for itself. There's a sense of like those business metrics like profit and revenue and growth, et cetera, are just kind of like expected and table stakes. And more of the social aspects that I talked about early on in the conversation are the types of things that are being used to define success for the next generation coming in and what they expect from themselves as leaders. And in terms of leadership styles, they're gravitating more towards the inspirational style of transformational leadership and less towards transactional leadership. Transactional leadership is a more step-based leadership with defined quantitative goals. Let's say you're doing a process and you need to complete a task. That would be a transaction. They don't yet see the value in that. So it's and this is preliminary. I don't mean to apply this generally as far as my research thus far. But the point is, as this continues to develop and as the next generation comes in to take leadership roles, we really need to be conscious of if these social aspects will remain a priority in terms of success metrics for these aspiring leaders, and how do we establish the importance of the business metrics as part of the way that they're measuring their own success. So I've got a couple minutes here just for a recap. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, there's significant challenges with revenue and profitability in this scenario. There are challenges with customer attrition and customer demand and resource allocation, resource utilization increasing, as well as employee satisfaction decreasing and attrition increasing. So we can apply different management era theories. I shared 4 in order to help solve some of these problems. And we also really need to understand the next generation of team members that are coming in, especially those aspiring leaders, what they're defining as success, and make sure that we have a meeting of minds, perhaps influencing their measures, as well as maybe thinking about changing some of ours. So this concludes the first Career Chat and Chew lunchtime. I hope to do this some more. I love to do mentorship and coaching, and also to share the things that I've been learning and to bring that forward to more people. And at any time, feel free to reach out and ask me a career question. Thanks a lot for your time. I'd love feedback on this video, and see you soon.